Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to a moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in the Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut, we're featuring disability awareness influencer and model Bri Scalesse. She advocates for disability representation in media and air travel rights for wheelchair users. She's a viral social media influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok. Now, after her time as a professional dancer with the Rolettes, she's modeled for Google, Victoria's Secret, NARS, Sephora, UGG, Skims, Rimmel, London, so many, just to name a few. I could go on. Maybelline, Tommy Hilfiger. She shot with almost everyone. Now, she joins me today. She's going to help me demystify the stigmas surrounding disabilities and advocate for wheelchair users worldwide. We're chatting modeling, social activism, and navigating life in a wheelchair with a super beautiful, talented Bri Scalesse. Welcome to the show, Stunner.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This is amazing. So let's jump right in. We know that about 10% of the global population, it's about 650 million people, have disabilities. And it also currently, it's estimated that 132 million people, it's about 2% of the global population, require a wheelchair. So these are big numbers. As a prominent advocate for disability representation, could you shed light on the current state of representation in media?
Yeah, so to throw another statistic out there, 1 in 4 people in the US are considered disabled, but only 3% of characters on television are represented and also in film as people with disabilities. And even then, sometimes it's not a disabled person playing the character. So, representation since I was even a young girl, I would say, has come a long way. We're seeing a lot more representation in the media, I would say, especially since the pandemic. But I would say representation is still very much lagging behind for people with disabilities. And when we are represented, it's a lot of stereotypes, and we're not represented kind of as our fullest selves.
You're 100% right. I was reading to prep for this interview that the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism revealed that in the top 100 films of 2019, only 2.3% of the speaking characters were depicted with a disability, so making the numbers even more narrow. Now, we have 26 million Americans aged 5 and older. They have self reported travel limiting disabilities. That's like we're talking about 13 to 15 million are aged 18 to 65, and we have over 11 million that are 65 and older. So access is extremely, extremely important. Could you share some insights into the challenges faced by wheelchair users, particularly in air travel?
Yes. So I would say access as a whole is a challenge for wheelchair users and disabled people, but particularly in air travel, it's a major, major struggle. So 20 over 20 wheelchairs are broken a day by airlines. And I think that people don't realize how essential a wheelchair is to a person, not just having a wheelchair, but actually having your own wheelchair that's custom made for your body. It's like a part of our body. So when our wheelchairs are broken, it's extremely detrimental to our physical health. There was actually an incredible disabled activist who passed away due to having her wheelchair broken, not being in her own wheelchair, and then having injuries due to that. So I've experienced having my own wheelchair broken by airlines, and my best friend has experienced it. And it is an extremely frustrating time because it's like a part of your body is not with you. So, as well as our wheelchairs not being handled properly by airlines, we also often, a lot of us aren't able to use the bathroom on flights. So, we are kind of portioning out our liquid intake and what we eat the day before because we know we're not going to be able to use the airplane's bathroom because they're not accessible to wheelchair users.
That's horrific.
Yeah, very
To
frustrating.
to think that this is where we're at in the year 2024. I know that, we're big on surveys because we can only go by statistics to address these issues and be socially active. But the survey conducted by the Muscular Dystrophy Association found that, to your point, 55% of wheelchair users reported experiencing issues related to accessibility or damage when traveling by air. So these numbers, and probably these numbers are underreported if you ask me, because not everybody's actually reporting this. Now, you've been incredibly successful as a model for various renowned brands. I named a whole bunch of them in the intro. How do you think the fashion industry has progressed in terms of inclusivity towards individuals with disabilities?
Yeah, so when I was little, the reason I wanted to become a model is because I didn't see anyone who looked like me in modeling and in the fashion space. And I would say it's definitely come a long way since I was a little girl. I think inclusivity really started to pop off after the pandemic. And we really saw in 2021, 2022, a lot of inclusivity for people with disabilities in major brands, but it is still mainly in the commercial space, I would say, more so rather than the high fashion space. We're really not seeing any wheelchair users represented in the high fashion space. If ever, it's one person on a runway a season. Which is really frustrating because we're such a large part of the population. So I really think fashion still has a long way to go, but it's definitely gotten better. We're really seeing ourselves represented in those commercial brands. So now we just have to see it more in the high fashion space.
Yeah, baby steps, baby steps. The Fashion and the Beauty Monitor Diversity Report found that in 2020, less than 3% of models featured in fashion campaigns identified as having a disability. But to your point, it marks an improvement from the previous years. So it's a slow but steady increase in inclusivity efforts. And I think we just have to keep at it, keep advocating. So, can you discuss the impact of empowering young disabled women through modeling and dance? I know that's important to you.
Yes. So honestly, the core of everything that I do is when I get a message from a young girl saying, seeing you made me feel beautiful in my wheelchair, or seeing you in that campaign made me feel worthy. I think that when we don't see versions of ourselves on screen, in media, in fashion, we don't know where we fit. And I very much felt like that as a young girl. And so it is incredibly important to see versions of yourself so that you can feel empowered. And I think that that's at the core of the reason of why I continue to do what I do. And I think that particularly with modeling, dance, acting, seeing yourself represented in those spaces is massive for disabled people because we, as we said, we are so underrepresented.
Without a doubt. And, if you look at the psychological and emotional effects of participation in physical activities like dance, this significantly improves self esteem and body image, specifically among people with individuals with disabilities like yourself. And a study published in the Journal of Rehabilitation Medicine found that engaging in these activities that promote self expression, like modeling, exactly what you're doing, enhances overall well-being and social integration for individuals with disabilities. So it's extremely important that you stick to the roadmap that you set out for yourself, because you're doing a fantastic job and you made so many people proud of you. Now, social media, let's go back to that. You're an influencer, you have hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok and on Instagram. How has social media played a significant role really in amplifying your advocacy efforts? And how do you think platforms like Instagram and TikTok have helped and raise awareness about disability rights?
Yeah, so I would say that with social media, we are kind of having control of our own narrative as people with disabilities. We get to show who we truly are to the world without any filtered narrative or lack of representation. Also, the communities that we can build. I've found such a beautiful community through TikTok and through Instagram, and that is so essential, especially when people become new wheelchair users, to feeling like they're not alone, to feeling like there is a purpose to keep living, to feeling like they can have a beautiful life. I really didn't get to see that much when I was little. So now I feel like with social media, there's such a power to seeing women living their dreams, to seeing people living their dreams in wheelchairs.
It's definitely connected the community, and that's what social media is. It breeds the right community, and if used properly, it's so impactful and useful. You have 70% of adults that are aged between 18 and 30 that are on Instagram, and these platforms really just provide such a vast audience for disability advocates like yourself to share your story and really educate others, because it's really just about sharing your story, educating and inspiring. That's all you could do, right? So this is extremely important. So I think that Social media definitely empowers individuals with disabilities by providing these very platforms for self representation and community building and bonding, really. So, what are some misconceptions people have about navigating life in a wheelchair?
Yeah, so I would say the most common misconception, unfortunately, is that it's not a life worth living and that it's not a full life. And even as I'm going about my day outside in New York City, I have people asking me questions about my life. Am I able to live on my own? Do I have a job? And I think that people don't understand how absolutely amazing life can be with a disability. There's a lot of adaptations that have to happen when you first become disabled, when you first become a wheelchair user. But once you figure that out, you are just as capable of living an amazing life as any other person. So I would say that is the biggest misconception, is that our lives are not as valuable as a non-disabled life.
Well, the fact of the matter is that you're 100% accurate because the survey conducted by Scope, and Scope is a UK-based disability. It's a UK-based disability charity. Are you ready? 67% of respondents felt that the general public has a limited understanding of the challenges faced by wheelchair users. Now, that's close to 70% what we're talking about, right? Feel that no one understands what wheelchair users are going through. Now, if you go even one step further, they revealed that stereotypes and misconceptions about disabilities lead to social exclusion and discrimination. So it's just one big vicious circle. And I always urge the public to educate themselves and to stop the discrimination and to really lend their hand to social activism and inclusivity to demystify the stigmas surrounding exactly what we're talking about today. So, what do you hope to achieve through your advocacy work in the future, and how can individuals support your efforts?
Yeah, I think through my advocacy, through my modeling, I hope to not only improve the representation of people with disabilities, but help shift those stereotypes, help shift those narratives so that people can see that we are just as worthy as everyone else. People can support that by following my social media, and also by, I think, just educating themselves on the way that disabled people live our lives, on all of these statistics that we're talking about, and understanding that we are a huge part of the population.
Yeah, you of course you're a huge part of the population and you have every right to exist alongside equally everybody else. And that's what I think people don't realize, and their beliefs are limited because their knowledge is limited. And we know that knowledge is power. So keep educating, keep doing what you're doing. Your of course your roadmap is quite unique and God has a plan for everyone. Now, if you could go back and give advice to your younger self, what would you say?
I would say that everything is going to be okay. My younger self felt so alone, not seeing any versions of herself, and felt really, I think, hopeless at one point. And I would tell myself that things are going to be so much more incredible than you could ever imagine, and to just believe in yourself. I feel like as I've gotten older, believing in myself, believing in the possibilities for me, has really changed everything. So I would just say, like, yeah, it's going to be okay.
It's gonna be okay. Well, that is the end of this fabulous interview. I could talk to you forever. You are so amazing and transparent, and I loved chatting with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
The tests we face in life's journey are not to reveal our weaknesses, but to help us discover our inner strengths. We can only know how strong we are when we strive and thrive beyond the challenges we face. And all the energy in the universe is evenly present in all places at the same time. Remember that. We don't get energy, we release energy. And the triggering mechanism to release energy is desire. When you have a strong desire to do something, you will always have the energy to do it, just like Bri Scalesse has done. That was our Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. Do check out Bri on the gram at Bri Scalesse, and you can also check her out on TikTok. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. That was our Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut, 100% pure coconut water. Imagine a drink that's nutrient-rich, powerfully refreshing, naturally sweet with no added sugars, not from concentrate, zero additives, low in calories, absolutely no artificial flavors, and is so tasty that it will become your new favorite beverage. Enter Once Upon a Coconut, the absolute best tasting coconut water you will ever try. Available in 4 refreshing flavors: pure, chocolate, pineapple, and sparkling with energy. Do your taste buds a favor and pick up some today at onceuponacoconut.com.